Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart. Today's topic, how to keep an open mind. There was this really good book I read a couple years ago. It's called Think Again by Adam Grant. So he is a professor at, I think it's at Wharton, in their business school. And he actually puts out a lot of good content. So if you ever check out his Twitter, or you can read his book. But I was looking through his Twitter the other day and had a little infographic on there. And it was kind of going over some of the concepts in this book. And I think we've probably gone over some of these in the past, because I like to bring up my favorite books on this. And so anyway, I thought he had some really good points in here. And I think just this topic in general is really apropos right now, right? With the advent of social media and the ability to share our opinions at the click of a mouse, I think it can be really easy to get into, we kind of build our bubbles of social networks, right? Being around people that we agree with, that share our same viewpoints, which is nice in one hand, right? Like it's that idea of tribes that as social beings, we tend to gravitate towards groups and people that have shared meaning, and that's an important part of getting by, but also making sure that we are around people that just, how do we include people in our friend group, in our just in the groups that we interact with, that maybe challenge some of our viewpoints, right? That cause us to think through, why do I believe X, Y, and Z, which really is an opportunity to strengthen and update our beliefs in the face of better evidence, of better logic, of things like that. And so I've really appreciated his style of thinking, and it's helped me to come up against some of my own biases and change the way that I'm thinking. So this first one is to think like a scientist. And so he actually goes through a couple of different other thinking styles that we typically go into. So he mentions three other kinds. He says a lot of times when our beliefs get challenged, we get into an argument, we think like a preacher, we think like a prosecutor, or we think like a politician. And it's three good ways to think about it, but interesting points is each. So he says in the book, when we're in preacher mode, we're convinced we're right. He said, from the salesman to the clergyman, this is the style you use when you're trying to persuade others to your way of thinking. And so there's actually, I had an interesting conversation. I went to a continuing education conference near the end of October, and I think it was October, maybe it's early November. I don't know. Time flies. But anyway, he was the guy giving the continuing education. I took him out to lunch because I wanted to ask him some different questions, and we got into the idea of updating your beliefs, of arguments. And he said there's a couple of ways that we often interact, right? And kind of going back to these different styles, these preacher, prosecutor, etc. And he said there's an argument where we're trying to get the other person in the argument to believe what we believe, right? To establish that our point is right or our view is correct. And often that doesn't get anywhere. Number two is a debate. And that's, you see this like in high school debate team, presidential debates, other things like that. And you're still, having having the argument with the other person, but your point is, or your purpose in a debate isn't to convince the person you're arguing against isn't to convince them that you're right and they're wrong, really. It's to convince the audience that that debate is too, that your point is right, that they should choose you, that they should follow you. And he said a third option is to have what he called a dialectic. And that's a conversation where you're going into it with a purpose of trying to update your beliefs, right? And you're really trying to strengthen each other. And so there still may be conflicting viewpoints, but the point isn't so much to convince the other person, but it's to help find the truth of the matter, right? It's to help each other become more accurate. And so I think just going to that idea of having an open mind of, can we go into more conversations in that dialectic mindset, that we're willing to look at the strengths of the other person's position, and sometimes that's hard, right? Maybe that position doesn't seem to have many strengths, but can we assume the best about that argument and the best about that person and draw conclusions in that way? And so we'll go into the couple of other thinking styles. So prosecutor. So we said preacher, right? We're trying to persuade other people to our way of thinking. Prosecutor, when we're in prosecutor mode, we're trying to prove someone else wrong. So obviously courtroom, right? The prosecutor is not about making the defendant look good. It's about showing why they're wrong, right? Showing why their argument doesn't work, why the evidence doesn't support their viewpoint, and proving their case. And then politician, it's no shock that when we're in politician mode, we're trying to win the approval of our audience. And what he talks about is that even though these styles are all a little bit different, right? They have a little bit different aim. That in all of them, we're unwilling to change our mind, right? Whether it's preacher, prosecutor, or politician, we really have no interest in changing our mind. We have no interest in updating our beliefs. It's really in the end about, again, convincing other people that we're right, proving other people that they're wrong, or winning approval. And so it was interesting because he said, in politician mode, I might tell you what you want to hear, but I'm probably not changing what I really think. I'm posturing as opposed to rethinking. And so, again, it's this idea of can I be willing to question some of my opinions, some of my beliefs, that instead of looking in the argument for confirmation of what I already believe, are there things that I haven't noticed? Are there points where my argument is weak? So if any of you are familiar with Charlie Munger, he was the business partner of Warren Buffett, and he said something really interesting once on opinions. And I thought this was fascinating, and I am awful at this. He said, I don't allow myself to have an opinion on anything unless I understand the opposing points of view and their arguments better than they do. And I thought that was really interesting, and I think that's a very challenging mindset to adopt. And I doubt that extended to everything, right? Like, why is barbecue sauce better than ketchup or whatever the thing is? I don't know. Probably not for silly simple things, but for things that mattered. It just, this idea of having a willingness to really understand other arguments, because when we have an open mind and when we look to understand those arguments, it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll always change our viewpoint. But when we look at those other arguments, when we look at an opposing side, it can actually help us to see weaknesses and holes in our own reasoning, and things that we may have missed or things that we haven't considered. And so going through that thought process and considering some of those things can actually help to, like, if we keep those same beliefs, to help strengthen them, right? Because we see the evidence and we recognize, you know what, here were some holes that I didn't recognize, but now I understand those, and that actually ends up strengthening this viewpoint. And so just having that willingness to change our minds, even though it doesn't mean we necessarily will change our minds, it helps us to update beliefs and develop better reasoning. So let's go to this second point, and I love how he phrases this. It's beware of Mount Stupid. So how many of you have ever found yourself on on Mount Stupid? So it's the idea that that we rise to the level of our own incompetence. So if any of you have ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, so they what was that comic strip? Dilbert would often make fun of that, right? That the managers were just didn't know what was going on and just were really stupid, and so that when we aren't in the habit of thinking like a scientist, it's really easy to develop kind of this false confidence around what we know. And I think part of the difficulty with this is that because of the internet, because we have so much knowledge at our fingertips, we sometimes develop an illusion that we have more knowledge than we really do. And so there's actually this book called the Knowledge Illusion, and it has a couple of different. You guys ought to go try some of these things. So two of the examples it gives is one is how does a bicycle work, and in this exercise they give people a picture of the two wheels and then the frame, and they ask, where do you put the pedals? And it's interesting because most of us have ridden a bike plenty of times in our lives. We've seen a lot of bikes, but when people are actually looking, when they're actually looking at the responses, people were just putting the pedals like all sorts of places they didn't know. Some people put it right, but some people put it like on the back wheel. Some people put it like through the frame in weird parts. There was actually a lot of people who didn't quite know where the pedals actually were when they thought about it, and then like how did the chain work and everything like that. And so something as simple as a bike, a machine that we've used very often, people actually didn't know like how that worked, right? Where exactly the pedals went. Another example they gave was well, how does a toilet work? And I think most of us from a base level are like, oh yeah, I know how a toilet works. You push the lever and then down, and then it does its thing. But what are actually the physics of making it work, right? The design of the toilet and how it, having the tower overhead and how everything works to actually go through and explain it, we begin to recognize that, oh, I actually don't know all the ins and outs of how this simple machine that I use every day actually works, right? What are the physics and mechanics of it? And so I think just that's actually a really useful exercise of kind of testing the limits of our own knowledge. And I think sometimes the difficulty is we associate strong feelings about a subject with knowledge or understanding of that subject. And that just isn't always the case, right? Strong feelings about something or strong opinions don't necessarily correlate with that thing being accurate. And so just being willing to take a step back and kind of put ourselves into that observer's chair, right? That's one of the unique things about being human, is that we can do that, what's called metacognition, right? Thinking about our thinking. And so being able to take a step back and observe what's going on, especially when something really drives those strong feelings, those strong emotions, being able to take a step back and think again, like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. What's behind that, right? Why do I feel so challenged here? Why am I, all of a sudden feeling angry or hurt or anxious or whatever that is? And being able to take a step back and kind of view that and think through that process can just be a really great way of not putting our foot in our mouths, right? Of overstepping the strength of our position and saying something that maybe we regret later. And so I like that. Don't plant a flag atop of Mount Stupid. Um, and it's it's so funny to think about this. How many of you, just drop one in the chat, um, have ever just thought back to, something that you thought, or things that you said, or stuff that you thought was really important when you were 15 or 16, and when you reflected, you're like, oh wow, that was real dumb. Like, I remember, um, there was a girl that I dated in high school, and she loved yoga, right? She was all about yoga. And back in the day, I remember thinking, "Oh, that's so dumb. No, you just gotta lift weights, right? I didn't even want to do cardio. You just gotta lift weights. That's a cool thing to do. All that other stuff's dumb. Why would you do that?" And obviously, in the face of schooling, and what we've learned about health and fitness, and what Cameron and I talk about with mobility, stability, strength, and power, right? You need so many different elements to have a healthy body. Obviously, it's important to have strong muscles, and to be able to use our strength quickly. But if we don't also have the cardio component, right? If we're not keeping our whole system healthy, if we can't move well, which yoga is a great way to build, flexibility, movement, Pilates, things like that. Cameron and I have talked that we're a fan of. Those things are all part of having a healthy body and being able to move well now and in the future. And so I look back on my 16, 17-year-old self. I'm just like, oh, like, you just didn't know. You just didn't know. So, Lori says, it's interesting raising a teen and and seeing her being in the say stupid stage and biting my tongue because I was there too. Well done, Lori. Well done. I think that is challenging, right? Because we can see we've been there, right? We've said so many stupid things, or had to update our beliefs on certain things. And so, yeah, challenging the parent, and how do I navigate that in a way that like is compassionate, but also helps them not keep being stupid. I love that. I know I always joke that you have these different phases. It goes from as a teen, or it goes from a little kid, right? Like, oh, mom and dad are Superman, Superwoman, right? Like, they know what's going on. They got everything figured out. And I think just in general, like, man, adults really know what's going on. And then as a teacher or as a teenager, you're like, oh, adults don't know everything. I actually know all this stuff, and I don't know how they missed all of this, because like I see it so clearly, right? And then early adulthood, you're like, you know what? Maybe mom and dad had some things right. I don't know. Like, I could see that. And then you get a little bit older, and you start having kids, and you're like, oh wow, like, I guess this isn't so easy. Mom and dad probably had a lot of things right. Like, I think they knew what they were doing. And then we get a little bit older, and we still have that appreciation for mom and dad. But then I think it comes to, you know what? No one probably has it fully figured out. We're trying the best that we can, and being able to recognize some of the still recognize the strengths of mom and dad, but also recognizing some of those weaknesses and those shortcomings, and how can I improve upon those. And so it's interesting to go through those different phases of learning. And I think that's what people who have kind of integrated those concepts well as they get older, right? You look at this contrast of people when they're even much older, and obviously there's a spectrum, but you have on the one end, right? Like, it goes back to my way is right, and I'm very unwilling to update my beliefs, and I can't believe XYZ group believes this. Everyone's probably had that relative it's a little bit on in years, and you're like, you know what? I just wish you would just not say words, because what's coming out isn't great, right? So it goes back into that my way of thinking is right. I've lived this long, and so I've finally figured out, that all my opinions are right. Versus the people who've really integrated those concepts as they age, and I think these people on this end of the spectrum tend to be a lot happier, because they're like, you know what, I found some ways of thinking that are really useful, but I also recognize that I'll never know everything. I'm still willing to learn, and as a result, they allow their beliefs to continue to be challenged. And so I think the people that have integrated those well into old age really are a lot happier and don't let some of their opinions narrow their mind to the way that everything sets them off, right? I've definitely had those relatives, right? And this group of people are doing this, and this group of people are doing that, and this, and they're just so miserable in those moments versus the people that are really willing to, again, do that thing like see strengths, recognize weaknesses, and have compassion. Um, those are the people that we tend to want to be around, and honestly, the people that tend to be the happiest. So, number three, this idea of embracing confident humility. Um, and so, I like the way that they said, argue like you're right, listen like you're wrong. And so, again, this idea that um, it's not a bad thing to, to put our argument out there and to say like, hey, these are the reasons that I believe X, Y, and Z. Um, and to be firm in that and to be confident in that, but also just not bringing with that an assumption that you are necessarily right and there's nothing you can learn from the other side. When we have that willingness to learn, even when we don't change our beliefs, it goes back to that idea of think like a scientist, right? How can I integrate these things, and how can I see the holes in my own reasoning? Um, and just doing that process over and over and over again. I think, again, as I'm thinking about this topic, I'm thinking, who are the people that I respect the most? Who are the people that I want to be around the most? Who are the people that I love to learn from? And there are all these people who have this confident humility, right? They understand a lot, right? They can argue well, but they just have this willingness to love people and be humble regardless of the outcome. I remember this. I think back to a couple of the professors that I had in grad school, and there's one guy, and it was actually interesting because he was a little bit, he was a younger one of the professors, and very intelligent, but he couldn't say he didn't know. He always had to have this. Well, what about this? And just always had a reason, even if it didn't feel very accurate to the rest of us. He would really never admit where he was wrong or where he could improve or where he could have done better, right? And versus one of my favorite teachers, who's actually he's the director of the program now, and he would say, I don't know all the time. He said, here's what we do know, here's what I think, but this is the limits of what I know, this is what I'm unsure about, this is what we're still trying to learn better. And that was a huge part of the reason that I really loved him as a professor, because again, very intelligent, very very well read, a lot of understanding in his domains of expertise, but just this air of humility that followed him everywhere and made me want to listen more and made me want to learn more and made me want to update those areas that I didn't know as well or that I was unsure about. And so he set this wonderful example, and I can think of lots of people like that who have just had this humble approach to learning and to knowledge, and it makes them infinitely approachable. It makes them so much fun to be around. It makes me want to learn from those people. And so, how can we embrace confident humility, right? How can we be willing to listen? And I think, they always tell you that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Butchered that. But this idea of going into conversations with the willingness to listen, not thinking about what we're going to say next, not with judgment, but just being willing to listen and to understand. And I think when people people can feel that, right? When we go in with that intent, not to fix a problem, not to spout our point of view, but to really just listen and understand and be there for them. And so I think that's a part of confident humility too, that we go in willing to learn. And then the last part is build a challenge network, and this is crucial. I talked earlier about social media has done a really great job at building echo chambers, right? Rooms full of people that share our same belief. And again, not that it's bad to be around people that share similar beliefs and similar values, but if we're just in an echo chamber, we don't have opportunities to learn. And so in building a challenge network, this is, I think that the values piece still goes into it. Right? We find people with similar values, but that maybe think about things differently, that think about things that we haven't, that challenge our thinking. And so Cameron and I joke about this. Cameron loves playing the devil's advocate, right? Well, what about this? Or what about that point? And I remember at first I was just like, ugh, like it made me so uncomfortable, because I was like, well, no, you're supposed to share my viewpoint on this thing, but being willing to go into that mindset and kind of flip things on its head has actually been so helpful for me to again, like, you know what, yeah, that actually probably isn't accurate. That's a really good point. Or no, like, given these, given your argument here, here's why I think that this thing is still valid, right? Or why I still believe this. And so just having people that have different perspectives, right? That's the beauty of coming together with other people, is everyone has a different life experience, right? Even in people that grew up in similar circumstances, like there's just so many different factors that influence who we become, that just other people can have really valuable perspectives that because of our life experience, because of how we grew up, we may have never encountered before. And so having those different lenses that people see the world through can just help us do a better job at coming to the truth. And so just one, so Adam Grant was actually on a podcast a couple weeks ago, one of the ones that I listened to, and he said that there's there's people that he follows on Twitter and on social media that like their viewpoints he totally disagrees with, but he really likes the way that they think. He respects their process of thinking and feels like that they're able to embrace kind of a critical thinking way of going about things. And so he said, I have to be careful because I'm a tenured professor, and so people see me following following certain people, and they assume that I believe whatever that person's saying. And so it's an interesting thing. And he said, and probably because that's the common thing, right? We follow the people that we agree with. And so he said, it's not that I agree with much of anything that they have to say, but I respect how the process that they use to come to that viewpoint. And again, it helps me to be a better thinker. And so thinking about that when we are building that challenge network, we don't necessarily have to ever agree, on certain arguments with those people, but can we have a respectful dialogue, and can we have that dialectic, right? Instead of trying to convince them that they're wrong or that we're right, can we go in with the objective, well, how can I learn? What is good in this person's way of thinking, and what are there potential habits of thinking that I can adopt? Are there potential viewpoints that I haven't thought of? And so just going in with the intent to learn. And so that's really what keeping an open mind is all about, with recognizing that we don't know everything, that we don't have all the answers, and that there's always ways to improve. It goes back to that concept that Cameron and I talk about of trial and learning. How can I get better and better over time at the things that I'm doing, and the way that I approach learning, and the way that I approach relationships? What can I learn from other people? And when we go in with that mindset, there's no end to what we can learn. And it's such the process is so much more fun, because we're not constantly butting up against rising emotions, right? We're able to kind of flow through those more, and and just again be open to learning, open to updating our beliefs, open to becoming better. And I think, again, understanding that life is a process of becoming, right? We don't arrive at like, now I'm finally there, I know all the things. It's how can I continue to adapt? How can I continue to improve and become the best version of me? And how can I help other people in my networks do the same? So, all right, we are over time. I've blabbed on long enough. So anyway, thank you, everyone, for joining. Cameron will be back tomorrow, so we will catch you all on tomorrow night's call. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.